I love insulin, as you can see, and I can't get enough of it. And that's why I have 4 types of insulin. 4 types, you say? Yes, 4 types. And I'm not just doing this for fun. I have very good reasons, I promise you, for each and every one of these insulins. Well, let's start with the insulin pump. I'm using an insulin pump based on ultra-fast-acting Fiasp insulin. I am using long-acting insulin from Tresiba, which stays in your body somewhere in between 24 to 72 hours. Then I'm using this NovoPen Echo, adjustable by half a unit, with again fast-acting Fiasp insulin. And finally, a large part of my daily insulin needs get covered by this old-fashioned regular human insulin, which is a fast-acting insulin but with a much slower absorption profile, much slower than the typical absorption that you see with ultra-fast-acting insulins of nowadays. Starting now with my basal. For my basal insulin, I'm following the so-called untethered approach, in which 50% of my basal insulin needs gets covered by the insulin pump, and the other 50% simultaneously gets covered by the long-acting insulin, which I inject before going to bed at night. That way I am combining the reliability of long-acting insulin, because once you inject it, it will be present in your body for 24 up to 72 hours, with the reliability of the insulin pump, which provides adjustable basal option. I am doing this for 2 reasons. I am choosing for the reliability of this long-acting insulin to prevent ending up in diabetic ketoacidosis very easily, and I am using the pump for the additional flexibility. I can still adjust about 50% of my basal insulin rate, and that can become very useful when I suddenly decide to go for long duration exercise. I am doing a lot of cycling typically, and also a bit of running, and I don't like to plan my exercise the day before. And if you are only using Tresiba long-acting insulin, you have to plan your exercise before, and that actually becomes even more difficult with Tresiba, since it stays in your body for longer than 24 hours. So it's very difficult to adjust your basal insulin rate when only using Tresiba. And then you end up consuming a lot of carbohydrates to maintain a proper blood glucose level during your exercise, since you cannot adjust your basal insulin rate to the proper level. Well, that's my basal insulin. Then for corrections and for high carbohydrate meals, occasionally I will still have a high carbohydrate treat. For those occasions, I will use ultra-fast-acting Fiasp insulin from this NovoPen Echo. First of all, I choose to do so for corrections because there is no reason to slow down corrections. Corrections should always be performed as quickly as possible. And maybe contrary to intuition, it actually reduces the risk of hypoglycemia because you are using insulin in a very short time interval. So you have a very, very good overview of the amount of insulin that is in your body, and you will also be able to quickly observe the response of your glucose level to the insulin that you injected. And my corrections typically are done as follows. I start correcting before going out of range, that's important. And I will typically use a large needle point of up to 14 millimeters and perform an injection in my shoulder into a muscle that will significantly speed up the absorption. And you can further speed it up by massaging the injection site. That way it's a matter of a few minutes sometimes that the insulin starts working, and you can immediately see a response in your blood glucose levels. Then I am also still using, although I am on a low carbohydrate diet, I am still using this ultra fast acting insulin in the rare occasions that I will be eating, for example, a piece of fruit. On those occasions I will be pre-bolusing, and typically I will again use a large needle point because high carbohydrate, high glycemic meals require fast absorption of insulin. Then finally, for most of my meals, basically all of my meals, I will use this old-fashioned regular human insulin. And the main reason for that, you can guess it, is the slow absorption of the insulin. And that slow absorption profile very nicely matches the glucose response profile to large protein boluses. If I am eating a meal of, say, 1 pound of meat, I will typically get a glucose response with a very moderate slope that stretches out over a period of, say, 6 to 8 hours. And that's exactly matching the absorption profile of this insulin. And matching those profiles is much easier than matching the typical profiles that you get from a high carbohydrate meal. A high carbohydrate meal will have a steep and high glucose peak, which has to be matched also with a ultra fast acting insulin in a large amount. And if you make a small error, of course, you will end up either in hyper or hypoglycemia. When using this slow acting insulin, I can, after the meal, casually look at my glucose levels on the continuous glucose monitor and, if needed, make small corrections. If I see that my blood glucose levels are gradually going up, I will typically inject another unit of slow-acting insulin, and if it goes up very quickly, I might even use the fast-acting insulin in smaller doses to bring it down very quickly. And of course, if it goes down, I will correct using 1 or 2 glucose tablets. Well, there you have it. That is my insulin regimen in a nutshell. I'm curious to hear about what types of insulins and what methods of insulin injections you are using. And of course, let me know about any questions. I'm happy to answer them in the comments.